Everyone, look at this man. He's nothing but a thief and a liar. Get out of my house!
Oh my God, did you hear that? I can't believe it.
I want you out of my sight. Your betrayal cost us everything, and now everyone here knows the truth.
This house belongs to me. That was what Zuri said, standing in the middle of the glass-walled living room, a hand resting lightly on the arm of the man she had brought into my home before the guests had even finished their first drink. She said it with the ease of someone who had repeated the sentence enough times in private that it no longer felt like a lie. She looked at me as if I were a guest who had stayed too long. Then she told me to take whatever clothes still mattered to me and leave before she had security escort me out. I remember the silence after that more clearly than I remember her words. Not because the room was quiet. It wasn't. There were investors near the bar, 2 senior executives from her company by the fireplace, a lender I recognized from a development breakfast in Ikoyi, and her new partner, Kwame Dlamini, standing beside her with the confident half-smile of a man who believed the hard part was already over. But even with all those people there, the room still felt silent. Because everyone thought they were watching one kind of ending, and only I knew they were standing in the middle of something else entirely. If you stay for stories where the loudest person in the room is not the one who wins, where patience matters more than performance, and where truth arrives with paperwork instead of shouting, then this is exactly the kind of story you're here for. I am Ayo Adewale. I have spent most of my adult life designing spaces for people wealthier than me, louder than me, and often less observant than me. I learned early that rooms tell the truth even when people do not. A badly placed chair, a shifted frame, a table moved 6 inches off balance. Little things reveal the person trying too hard to control what others see. That afternoon, before Zuri even spoke, I already knew something had changed. The armchair near the east-facing window had been moved. Not much, just enough. It used to sit at the exact angle where morning light landed across the fabric between 7:10 and 7:40. I had chosen that position myself. I had restored that chair by hand 4 years earlier. When I walked in and saw it turned away from the light, I understood something before she opened her mouth. Someone had started rewriting the room, and Zuri had decided I was no longer part of the final version. What she did not understand, what she had never taken the time to understand in all 14 years of our marriage, was that the house itself had never been ours in the way she believed it was. It belonged to the Adewale Heritage Trust. My grandfather had created it long before I was born. The trust held land, buildings, certain investments, and the old family residence that had later been renovated into the home where Zuri now stood making ownership claims in front of people who had no idea they were about to witness the collapse of her certainty. The trust paid the taxes. The trust covered the structural insurance. The trust funded every major restoration. The deed was not in my personal name, and it was absolutely not in hers. That distinction mattered. It always had. But like many people who mistake proximity for ownership, Zuri believed that living inside something long enough made it hers. That belief had become the foundation of her arrogance. And arrogance, I have noticed, is most dangerous when it has gone unchallenged for years. Zuri and I met at a commercial design expo in Lagos. She was already moving upward inside a real estate development group called Kariba Urban Holdings. Sharp, polished, tireless. She knew how to command a room before she entered it. She had the habit of arriving already briefed on everyone who mattered. Back then, I admired that about her. Later, I realized there was another side to it. People who think they already understand everything often stop asking the one question that would save them. When we got engaged, the family attorney, Ms. Nandi Okafor, handled the prenuptial agreement. It was not emotional. It was procedural. The trust required it. She explained every clause clearly. Zuri was offered independent counsel. She declined. She signed where she was told to sign, initialed where required, turned pages quickly. The whole thing took less than an hour. I remember Nandi pausing once, asking if Zuri wanted more time to review the residence clause. Zuri smiled and said something like, "Io and I are building a life, not planning a courtroom." At the time, it sounded romantic. Years later, I understood it differently. The residence clause was simple. If the marriage remained intact, she had full right to live in the home. If the marriage ended under certain verified conditions, that right ended too. No claim to sell the house. No right to borrow against it. No authority to present it as a marital asset. Nothing vague, nothing hidden. Nothing difficult to understand if one had bothered to read carefully. For years, there was no reason to revisit any of it. Life became busy. My studio grew slowly. Zuri's career grew faster. Her salary outpaced mine, then surpassed it by enough that she began mentioning it in small, casual ways that did not sound cruel until much later. A dinner bill she covered with a joke. A renovation suggestion phrased like permission. A remark about how stability in a marriage sometimes comes from the more ambitious partner carrying the heavier load. None of it was a fight. Not then. Just little revisions. Little edits to the narrative. And because I was busy building projects, I let too many of them pass without correction. About 8 months before she threw me out, Nandi called me in for what was supposed to be a routine trust review. We met in her office on Victoria Island. She had the file open, tabs in 3 colors, glasses low on her nose, that calm expression she wore whenever she was about to say something precise and inconvenient. She asked, "Does Zuri fully understand her legal relationship to the house?" I answered honestly, "No. She knows the house is tied to the family structure. I don't think she understands the actual mechanics." Nandi nodded, as if confirming something she had already suspected. Then she said, "That may become relevant sooner than you think." I asked her what she meant. She turned the file slightly toward me and showed me an alert from the Trust Property Monitoring Service. An inquiry had been made regarding the title history of the house. Not by me. Not by anyone from the trust office. Someone had looked at the record, seen an ownership structure they didn't understand, and started asking the wrong questions. At that point, I still did not think affair. I thought confusion. Maybe Zuri was reviewing our finances. Maybe someone at her office was advising her on an investment vehicle. Maybe it was nothing. That was the last week I still had the luxury of maybe. The changes at home became harder to ignore after that. Her phone face down at all times. Late returns with explanations that were detailed but strangely unverifiable. Weekend meetings that never matched the shared calendar she had once insisted we keep. A softness in her voice when texting someone else, and an impatience in that same voice when answering me. I did what I always do when something feels structurally wrong. I documented. Not dramatically. Quietly. Dates, patterns, inconsistencies. Then one evening I came home earlier than expected from a client consultation in Lekki. I let myself in through the side entrance. I heard voices in the main room. One was hers. The other belonged to a man I recognized from her company's annual gala. Kwame Dlamini, Regional Strategy Director, polished, confident, a man who wore expensive calm-like cologne. They were standing too close to be misunderstood. I stopped in the doorway. Neither of them looked guilty enough to pretend. Zuri turned first. She did not apologize. She did not even seem startled for more than half a second. Then she straightened and said the marriage had been over for a long time, whether I wanted to admit it or not. Kwame said nothing at first. He just watched me like a man assessing whether the unpleasant part could be handled quickly. Zuri told me I had grown too comfortable, that I mistook contribution for importance, that she had carried more of our life than I had. Then she said the line that later returned to destroy her. The house stays with me. I asked one question. Are you sure about the ownership documents? She said her lawyers had checked everything. She said there was nothing in my name. She said it like that settled the matter. I remember looking at Kwame when she said it. He didn't interrupt. That told me a lot. It meant he had heard the same version. It meant he had accepted it. And it meant both of them had built plans on a conclusion neither had properly verified. I did not argue. That disappointed her, I think. People who prepare for battle are often confused by discipline. I said I would collect some things later. I shook Kwame's hand. His expression flickered at that. Then I left. From the car, I called Nandi. She picked up immediately. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Come tomorrow morning. There's more." The next day, she laid 3 documents on her desk. The first was the trust certificate and payment history. The second was the prenup, marked at the residence and infidelity clauses. The third was worse. 3 separate preliminary financing applications had been filed through 2 lenders in the past 6 weeks. The house had been listed as a supporting marital asset. All 3 applications included declarations that suggested Zuri had a legal claim to the property. I sat very still while Nandi explained. If it had been one careless statement, perhaps it could be corrected quietly. 3 applications meant pattern, intent, confidence. The house looked immaculate. Fresh flowers at the entry console, warmer bulbs in the recessed lighting. The art above the dining credenza slightly recentered. Some of the changes were tasteful. Most were performative. Kwame stood near the drinks tray speaking to 2 men in finance. His posture changed when he saw me, but only a little. A man relaxing into an expected victory. I noticed the lender representative almost immediately. I also spotted a board advisory member from Kariba, Mr. Temba Dube. Good. Better than good. Useful. I set the bag near what used to be my home workspace, now restaged as a casual sitting corner. I accepted a glass of water and waited. At 7:26, Zuri moved to the center of the room and began speaking. She was excellent. That was part of the tragedy. Some people are so gifted at presentation that they eventually confuse persuasion with proof. She thanked everyone for coming. She spoke about evolution, alignment, bold next chapters. She introduced Kwame not merely as a professional partner, but with the intimate ease of someone announcing a future already in progress. Then she gestured to the house. "My home," she said, smiling. "This space will be where we host the first series of private investor conversations." I watched the lender rep make a note. Good. Then Zuri turned to me. She told the room she appreciated that I had come to collect the last of my things calmly. She said transitions are easier when everyone accepts reality with dignity. A few guests gave me sympathetic glances. They had already categorized me. Displaced husband, less successful spouse, quiet casualty. Kwame stepped forward with a document in hand, a notice, formal enough to impress guests, crude enough to collapse under actual scrutiny. He handed it to me and said something about boundaries and moving forward. I unfolded it, read it, and asked the only question that mattered. Are you both absolutely sure about the ownership paperwork on this house? Zuri's expression tightened. Not much. Just enough for me to know she hated being asked that in front of witnesses. She said her legal review had been thorough. She said there was nothing in my name. Again, that line. Nothing in my name. As if absence of my personal title somehow created ownership for her. I nodded once. Then I said, "That's fine. My counsel just arrived." The front door opened almost on cue, 7:30 exactly. Nandi Okafor entered, carrying one leather case and the kind of calm that makes noisy people nervous. She did not raise her voice. She did not ask permission. She greeted no one beyond a brief professional nod and walked straight to the dining table. Then she opened the case and placed the first file down. The room changed immediately, not because anyone yet understood the details, because authority had arrived without performance. One of the guests tried to step away discreetly. No one else moved. Nandi began with the trust certificate. She explained, in language so plain even the least legal mind in the room could follow, that the property was held by the Adewale Heritage Trust, established prior to my birth, with all taxes, repairs, insurance, and structural payments drawn from trust accounts exclusively. No marital commingling, no transfer, no spouse entitlement. Then she placed the prenup on the table and turned to the residence clause. Zuri's signature was visible. So were her initials on every required page. Nandi read the key portion aloud. No right to sell, no right to mortgage, no right to leverage the asset. Conditional residence only. Kwame's face changed first. Men like him do not fear morality nearly as much as they fear undocumented risk becoming documented risk. He looked at Zuri. She kept her eyes on Nandi. That told me everything I needed. She had not told him the full truth. Or worse, she had told him a version she believed because believing it benefited her. Nandi then introduced Amma's report. She did not sensationalize it. She summarized it. Duration of affair, relevant dates, travel discrepancies, corroborating evidence sufficient to activate the infidelity clause. Again, no drama, just record. The room was so quiet then that I could hear the soft click of someone setting down a glass by the fireplace. Then came the fourth set of papers, the loan applications. 3 of them. 2 lenders. Read in a cinematic storytelling tone, slightly fast, with tightly controlled pacing and minimal pauses throughout. Potential exposure. Did she sign them herself? I asked. Yes, Nandi said. And if these proceed, it becomes significantly more serious. I asked whether Kwame was involved. Nandi said his name appeared in one supporting communication thread and in a project note attached to one of the financing packages. So yes, he was involved enough. Not careful enough. And not nearly as smart as he thought he was. A private investigator named Amma Mensah joined the matter that same week. Nandi trusted her. I trusted Nandi. Amma was discreet, efficient, and allergic to drama. Exactly the kind of person you want handling a situation built on lies. While she worked, I kept my public behavior neutral. I moved into my studio's upstairs suite temporarily. I answered messages politely. I did not defend myself to mutual friends. I did not post anything cryptic. I did not rush. Meanwhile, Zuri began telling people a version of the story that made her sound gracious. According to her, we had simply outgrown each other. According to her, I understood the situation and would transition out quietly. According to her, the home issue had already been settled. That phrase came back to me often, already settled. There is something fascinating about watching someone speak certainty into existence because reality has not contradicted them quickly enough. By the end of the second week, I learned something else. A young architect from my studio, Kamau Njoroge, had lost a major office redesign contract months earlier under circumstances that had never fully made sense. He had done excellent work, better than the firm that ultimately got the job. At the time, the explanation was vague: internal alignment, strategic preference, executive discretion. Now, through a few careful questions and one conversation too many, I began to see the truth. The winning firm had ties to Kwame. Zuri had been in the approval room. Kamau had been quietly pushed aside. That detail mattered to me for reasons beyond business. Kamau reminded me of myself at 26, disciplined, under-recognized, too talented to be handled casually. When people with power rearrange outcomes to suit private alliances, they rarely understand how many lives they distort. Amma's first report arrived 11 days after we engaged her. The affair had begun nearly a year earlier. There were hotel logs, travel inconsistencies, restaurant charges, witness timings, photos from 2 weekends Zuri had described to me as strategy retreats. The report also included notes suggesting that Zuri and Kwame had been discussing a joint venture. A boutique residential development consultancy. They intended to use the house as the impression-setting address, a prestige anchor, a place to entertain lenders and early investors, a foundation piece. They were not just sleeping together. They were building on top of something they did not own. That was when I understood what patience could buy us. Not revenge, clarity. Nandi said the same thing in her own way. The more publicly she represents the asset as hers, she told me, the stronger the record becomes. A week later, the opportunity arrived by itself. Zuri sent out invitations for a private dinner at the house. Not a personal dinner, a business gathering. New venture positioning, selected investors, industry contacts, at least one board-linked executive from Kariba Urban Holdings, and most importantly, a commercial lender representative. When I told Nandi, she didn't even hide her satisfaction. "That," she said, "is our room." The plan was simple, because complicated plans fail under ego. I would attend. I would arrive slightly late. I would behave exactly as Zuri expected me to behave. Nandi would arrive at the point of maximum public certainty. Not before, not after. The timing mattered. Truth is more effective when it interrupts a performance at the exact moment the performer feels safest. The night before the dinner, I barely slept. Not from fear, from focus. I reviewed every possible variation in my mind. Would she make the claim casually or directly? Would Kwame speak first? Would the lender ask questions? Would the board executive stay long enough? Nandi told me not to over-design the outcome. People who think they are winning, she said, usually provide enough evidence on their own. She was right. I arrived at 7:18, carrying an empty overnight bag. A prop, really. a visual confirmation for the room that I was there to collect leftovers from a life already decided for me. Zuri opened the door herself. She looked at the bag, then at me. Her expression said everything. She thought the story was landing exactly where she had scripted it. The house looked immaculate. Fresh flowers at the entry console. Warmer bulbs in the recessed lighting. The art above the dining credenza slightly recentered. Some of the changes were tasteful. Most were performative. Kwame stood near the drinks tray, speaking to two men in finance. His posture changed when he saw me, but only a little. A man relaxing into an expected victory. I noticed the lender representative almost immediately. I also spotted a board advisory member from Kariba, Mr. Temba Dube. Good. Better than good. Useful. I set the bag near what used to be my home workspace, now restaged as a casual sitting corner, each identifying the house as a marital support asset, each containing representations that were legally false. Nandi looked directly at the lender rep as she explained that formal notice had already been prepared, and that all relevant institutions would receive immediate clarification of the property's true ownership status. The lender rep stopped pretending to be neutral. She was now in professional damage control mode. Kwame finally spoke. He asked whether there had been some misunderstanding in how the house had been characterized during financing discussions. That was the closest he came to admitting panic. Nandi answered him without softness. Misunderstanding requires uncertainty. These filings contain signed declarations. That ended him. Not physically, psychologically. You could see him detach from the future he thought he was standing inside. The board advisory member, Mr. Dube, did not say much. He took out his phone, typed something, and put it away. I knew what that meant. A man in governance does not take notes in moments like that, unless consequences are about to begin. Zuri's lawyer, who had apparently been invited to the dinner as a symbolic display of control, tried to object to the setting. Nandi answered with one sentence. Your client publicly asserted ownership before professional witnesses. A public correction is appropriate. No one had anything useful to say after that. What followed was not an explosion. It was worse. It was orderly collapse. Guests began leaving in polite fragments. The lender rep excused herself first. Two investors followed. Then the board advisor. Then one of the senior executives. Each departure removed another piece of social oxygen from the room. Kwame lasted less than 10 minutes after that. He said he had relied on representations made to him. He said he needed to consult counsel. He picked up his jacket and walked out without touching Zuri, without defending her, without looking back. That was the moment I think she finally understood the difference between confidence and cover. Confidence had brought him there, but cover had just vanished. Within 20 minutes, the room held only 5 people. Zuri, her lawyer, Nandi, myself, and the silence she had created. I looked around the house then, at the recessed lights I had selected, at the shelving proportions I had drawn, at the staircase detail I had fought a contractor over, because I refused to let them cheapen the line. All of it was still there. The room had not betrayed me. Only the person standing in its center had. 3 days later, Zuri called. Her voice was controlled, but not steady. She said perhaps matters had escalated unnecessarily. She said 14 years of marriage should count for something. She said we should discuss a fair outcome. I listened until she reached the end of her prepared softness. Then I asked, "Are you apologizing or are you negotiating?" Read the following complete script as one continuous narration, using only the James voice. Use a slightly fast but clear reading pace, cinematic and dramatic storytelling, controlled bassy authority, and strong emotional restraint. Keep pauses absolutely minimal. Do not insert dramatic pauses, long hesitations, or silence between lines. Maintain natural sentence rhythm and emphasis, but move smoothly and continuously from beginning to end. Do not add any words, commentary, character voices, or narration other than the script itself. She said my tone was unhelpful. That answered the question. I told her there would be no direct discussions outside counsel. Then I ended the call. The divorce itself moved faster than most people expected. Once the documents were fully reviewed, there was no serious legal argument for her position. The residence right ended. She retained what was legally hers, her earnings, her accounts, her personal assets. But the house was never part of that category. She was given 30 days to remove her belongings. I did not shorten the period. I did not stand over boxes. I did not create scenes. I had no interest in theatrical cruelty. By then, reality was doing enough on its own. Kariba Urban Holdings opened an internal review within weeks. Not because of the divorce, because of the business dinner, because of the contract irregularities, because of the venture overlap, because people in authority had now seen enough to start asking the questions they should have asked earlier. The office redesign contract that Kamau had lost was reevaluated. His original proposal was still on file. He was invited to resubmit. He did. He won. When I called him with the news, he went quiet for a few seconds before speaking. Not because he was surprised his work was good enough, because sometimes the world delays justice so long that when it finally appears, it feels unfamiliar. 6 months later, after the East Wing renovation was complete, I handed Kamau a key. I converted that side of the house into a working studio. Proper drafting space, natural light, storage for material samples. A place where talent could grow without begging for permission. The first morning he worked there, we spent nearly 3 hours in companionable silence. Drawing, reviewing, adjusting. It was one of the calmest mornings I had known in years. Not because the past no longer mattered, because it no longer controlled the room. About a year later, Zuri called again. No lawyer, no proposal. Just her. She asked whether I ever thought about our marriage before it broke. Not the ending, the middle, the real years. I told her yes. I think about the effort I made in good faith. I think about what I built honestly. I do not think much about the version you invented after you stopped valuing it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she understood. I told her I did not need her to. After the call, I went back to a floor plan spread across my work table. A new private residence. Ground-up commission. The sort of project that begins with lines no one else yet believes in. I stood over that drawing and adjusted the eastern wall by less than an inch. Just enough to change how the morning light would travel through the main room. People think justice always arrives like thunder. It doesn't. Sometimes it arrives like a file opening on a dining table. Sometimes it sounds like a lawyer reading the clause someone once signed too quickly. Sometimes the person who wins is simply the one who kept records while everyone else performed certainty. And sometimes the house never changes hands at all. Only the truth does. If this story stayed with you, if you understand what it means to build quietly while other people mistake silence for weakness, then you already know why stories like this matter. Because noise looks powerful. Until the
Subscribe for more
paperwork arrives.
videos. Turn on notifications.